The first mistake the homeowners association made was assuming she was powerless. Evelyn Carter had lived on the edge of Brookwood for as long as anyone could remember. Her little farmhouse sat on 30 acres of rolling green land, framed by oak trees that whispered in the wind like old friends. She was in her late 60s now, a widow with sharp eyes and a voice that carried the weight of generations. People in town respected her, but they also underestimated her. That was the second mistake. The developers came first, sharp-suited men with polished shoes that never touched mud. They had maps, blueprints, and promises. A master-planned community, they called it, rows of luxury homes, a golf course, a clubhouse gleaming with chandeliers. They said it would bring prestige, wealth, and new life to the sleepy suburb. What they didn't say was that Evelyn's land was in the middle of it all. At first, they asked to buy her property. They offered money, a lot of it. Enough to tempt someone desperate. But Evelyn didn't even let them finish their pitch. "My husband and I built this house with our hands," she told them, her voice steady. "My grandparents are buried on this land. You can't put a price on that." The developers exchanged tight smiles, the kind that never reached their eyes. They were used to people giving in. They weren't used to no. When she refused, they didn't argue. They just moved on, quietly adjusting their plans. That was the third mistake. Months later, construction began. Bulldozers roared, foundations cracked open the earth, and concrete spread like a disease. Evelyn watched from her porch as the land around her transformed into cookie-cutter perfection. One house went up. Then another. And another. Before long, there were streets where fields had once been, manicured lawns where wildflowers used to grow. 96 homes in total. Each one neatly wrapped in vinyl siding and HOA regulations. The residents who moved in didn't question much. They signed their contracts, unpacked their moving trucks, and hung their welcome signs. To them, Evelyn's little farmhouse looked like a relic, a stubborn reminder of a past they didn't care to understand. Some of them complained. Some whispered that it was only a matter of time before the HOA took care of it. But Evelyn wasn't worried. Not even a little. Because Evelyn had a secret. When her grandfather had passed down the land, he left her more than just acres and memories. He left her documents. Yellowed papers that smelled faintly of dust and ink, locked away in a cedar chest beneath her bed. Deeds. Surveys. Handwritten contracts from nearly a century ago. Proof, in black and white, that every inch of the ground those 96 houses now stood on still legally belonged to the Carter family. And Evelyn, unlike the HOA, knew how to wait. She didn't storm their meetings. She didn't shout at their board members. She simply watched, year after year, as the HOA built its kingdom on her soil. She let them pour their money, their sweat, and their pride into it. She let them believe they were safe. Until the day she decided it was time. It started with a letter. The HOA president, Margaret Ellison, found it in her mailbox one bright spring morning. Margaret was the kind of woman who ran neighborhoods like empires. Her blonde bob was sharp enough to cut glass, and her pearl necklace gleamed even in the shade. She prided herself on order, trash cans lined up perfectly, lawns trimmed to regulation height, fences painted in HOA-approved beige. She didn't tolerate problems. And Evelyn Carter, in her eyes, was a problem. The letter was short, typed neatly on plain white paper. To the board of the Brookwood Homeowners Association. I am writing to inform you that your organization has erected 96 homes and all associated infrastructure on land that does not legally belong to you. Said land remains the property of the Carter estate. You are now trespassing on private property. Sincerely. Evelyn May Carter. Margaret laughed when she read it. She crumpled it in her manicured hand and tossed it into the recycling bin. Crazy old woman, she muttered. But a seed of unease took root in her stomach. The next day, Evelyn sent another letter. This one came with copies of the deeds. And this time, Margaret didn't laugh. The HOA boardroom was a polished glass and steel space that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. On the wall hung a framed mission statement about community, integrity, and excellence. Underneath it, 6 board members sat around a long mahogany table, their faces pale as they stared at the photocopied deed spread out in front of them. The papers weren't some internet printouts. They were official, county stamps, notarized seals, signatures from names long dead but still legally binding. Margaret Ellison cleared her throat, trying to regain control of the room. This doesn't mean anything. It's probably some clerical mistake. We own this land now. Obviously. But her vice president, a nervous accountant named Gerald, shook his head. He had already made calls. I checked with the county clerk's office this morning. These documents are real. They were never transferred out of the Carter family's name. Legally, this land never left Evelyn's ownership. The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of the decorative wall clock, each second stabbing at their nerves. Margaret leaned back, her pearl necklace trembling slightly against her throat. That can't be possible. We have a development contract. We bought this land. Gerald's voice cracked. No, Margaret. We bought it from a developer who didn't own it. Which means, technically, all 96 homes are sitting on someone else's property. The words landed like a bomb. For the first time, Margaret felt something she wasn't used to, fear. Across town, Evelyn Carter sipped sweet tea on her porch swing, watching the sunset stain the horizon in shades of gold and crimson. She wasn't gloating. Not yet. But there was a calm satisfaction in knowing the storm she predicted had finally arrived. Her neighbor, a kind woman named Ruth, stopped by with a basket of biscuits. She glanced nervously at the construction beyond Evelyn's oak trees. You really mean to go after them, Evie? Evelyn smiled faintly. They went after me first. Built their houses like my land was dirt under their shoes. My daddy always said, don't pick a fight you can't finish. Looks like they picked one anyway. She tapped the cedar box resting at her feet. Inside were more papers, tax receipts, maps, even a court ruling from decades ago that reinforced her claim. The Carter estate wasn't just a family legacy, it was a fortress of law. Evelyn had waited patiently. And now, she was ready to step forward. The next HOA meeting was chaos. Word had spread among the residents, and the clubhouse was packed with worried homeowners. Couples clutched each other's hands. Parents rocked restless toddlers on their hips. The air buzzed with panic. A man in a polo shirt stood up, his voice sharp. Are you telling us our houses aren't even on our land? That we paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for nothing? We're working on it, Margaret snapped, trying to hold her composure. Our legal team is reviewing the matter. But another woman shouted, reviewing? My mortgage is bigger than my husband's salary. What happens if she takes it all? The crowd erupted. Voices overlapped, anger swelling into shouts. Someone pounded a fist against the table. A baby began to wail. Margaret slammed her gavel down, her face flushing red. Order! Order! But the order was gone. Fear had turned to fury, and every furious eye in that room was aimed at her. The very next morning, a team of HOA lawyers marched up to Evelyn's porch. They were armed with briefcases and arrogance, their polished shoes crunching against her gravel driveway. The lead attorney, a tall man with slick back hair, adjusted his tie. Mrs. Carter, we need to clear this up immediately. The HOA has invested millions into this development. There must be some misunderstanding. Evelyn rocked gently in her chair, unbothered. A misunderstanding's when someone forgets your birthday. This is theft. You built 96 homes on land that doesn't belong to you. The lawyer forced a smile. Surely we can come to a reasonable settlement. Evelyn set down her teacup, her eyes narrowing. Reasonable? You didn't come to me when you wanted to build. You thought I'd roll over, that I'd just die off and save you the trouble. But I'm still here. The lawyer's smile faltered. If this goes to court, it'll be messy. Expensive. Years of litigation. Are you prepared for that? Evelyn leaned forward, her voice low and steady. Son, I've been prepared for this since the day you drove your first bulldozer across my fence line. By the end of the week, the HOA had a grim report. Evelyn wasn't bluffing. Every title, every survey, every legal line in the books backed her claim. The developers had ignored it, gambling that she'd either sell or fade away. Instead, she had been building her case like a hunter laying a trap. Now the jaws were closing. Homeowners started organizing secret meetings without the board. Some wanted to sue the HOA for fraud. Others talked about abandoning their homes altogether. The once pristine neighborhood, with its symmetrical lawns and glossy cul-de-sacs, felt like it was built on quicksand. And Evelyn Carter? She hadn't even played her strongest card yet. The first sign of collapse came on a Monday morning. Residents of Brookwood woke to find bright orange notices taped to their doors. Thick, official paper. Black letters stamped with the county clerk's seal. Notice of trespass. Beneath it, a line that made stomachs drop. This residence is situated on private property owned by the Carter estate. Occupancy without authorization constitutes trespassing under state law. Panic spread like fire. Children found the papers before their parents did. Dogs barked as homeowners tore the notices down, clutching them in shaking hands. Phones lit up. Facebook groups exploded. Text chains buzzed with rumors. By noon, the clubhouse was overflowing with furious residents demanding answers. Margaret Ellison stood at the front, her once immaculate composure fraying at the edges. These notices don't mean anything, she declared, her voice sharp but unsteady. Mrs. Carter has no authority to evict anyone. We are still the rightful community owners. But a man in the back shouted, the county stamp says otherwise. Another voice rose, did you even check before you sold us these homes? Did you know about this? Margaret's cheeks flushed crimson. Of course not. The developers. But the excuse died in her throat. Because everyone could see it now, the cracks in her empire. That evening, Margaret stormed into Evelyn's yard with 2 board members in tow. Their heels sank into the grass as they marched toward the porch where Evelyn sat, lantern light flickering around her like an aura of calm defiance. Margaret didn't bother with greetings. She thrust one of the orange notices in Evelyn's face. What is this stunt? You can't just terrorize an entire neighborhood. Evelyn didn't flinch. She calmly rocked in her chair, her eyes glinting like steel. It's not a stunt. It's a warning. The law says they're trespassing. I'm simply letting them know before I take the next step. The shorter board member, a frazzled woman named Denise, barked, next step. What next step? Evelyn leaned forward, her voice a whisper sharp enough to cut, eviction. Margaret's pearl necklace trembled against her throat. You wouldn't dare. Evelyn's lips curled into a slow smile. Try me. By midweek, the panic had turned into desperation. Realtors refused to list Brookwood homes, too much legal risk. Banks stopped approving mortgages in the subdivision. Insurance companies began backing out, citing unresolved property disputes. The dream neighborhood was collapsing in real time. Inside her farmhouse, Evelyn sorted through another stack of documents. This time, she wasn't alone. Sitting across the table was attorney Malik Henderson, a sharp-dressed black lawyer with a reputation for taking on giants, and winning. You've got them cornered, Malik said, adjusting his glasses as he flipped through the papers. Every house they built, every road they paved, it's all on your land. You could kick them out tomorrow if you wanted. Evelyn nodded slowly. I don't just want to kick them out. I want them to feel what my family felt when they thought they could bury us under concrete. I want them to learn. Malik studied her for a moment, then smiled. Then we'll do this smart. We won't evict them. Not yet. We'll let the fear do the work first. The HOA scrambled. They called emergency meetings with lawyers, begged county officials for intervention, and even tried to pressure Evelyn into negotiations. But Evelyn stayed silent. She didn't attend their meetings, didn't return their calls. She let her lawyer speak for her. And Malik was ruthless. He filed a formal lawsuit, the Carter Estate vs. the Brookwood Homeowners Association. The demand was staggering: ownership of the land restored, back rent for every house built, and damages for unlawful use of property. The news hit like a thunderclap. Local media swarmed the neighborhood. Headlines blared. HOA faces lawsuit after building on wrong land. Black woman's family deed threatens suburban dream. 96 homes could face eviction. TV crews rolled past Evelyn's farmhouse, cameras catching her silhouette against the setting sun. She never stopped to speak, she just waved politely, her calm smile a sharp contrast to the chaos unraveling around her. Inside Brookwood, neighbors turned on each other. Some blamed the HOA board for negligence. Others whispered bitterly about Evelyn, calling her greedy, cruel, un-American. But some, especially the younger families, saw something else in her. A woman who had been ignored, dismissed, and pushed aside, now standing up to the very system that thought it could erase her. Late one night, as Evelyn was locking her front door, she found a note tucked under the doormat. Scrawled in messy handwriting, it read: Mrs. Carter, not all of us are against you. Some of us know you're right. Just, please don't punish the children for our mistakes. For the first time, Evelyn's resolve wavered. She thought of the children riding bikes on the sidewalks, their laughter floating through the evening air. They weren't the ones who signed contracts or ignored her rights. But then she thought of her grandfather, of his cracked hands signing those deeds, swearing that the land would never be lost. And Evelyn whispered into the night, this isn't punishment. It's justice. By the end of the month, Evelyn had won the first battle in court. The judge upheld the validity of her family's deed, recognizing her as the rightful landowner. The HOA's defense crumbled, their developers vanished into legal shadows, and the homeowners were left dangling in limbo. Margaret Ellison sat in her Mercedes, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. For the first time in her life, she understood what it felt like to lose control. But Evelyn wasn't done yet. She had set the trap. And soon, she would snap it shut. The courthouse steps were packed. Reporters jostled for space, microphones angled like spears toward the doors. Cameramen perched on ladders, lenses trained on the grand double doors where the Brookwood HOA board would emerge any moment. The lawsuit had turned into a spectacle. Local news ran daily updates, and national outlets had begun circling like vultures. The narrative was irresistible: a powerful suburban HOA versus a widowed black landowner armed with nothing but century-old deeds and steel resolve. When Margaret Ellison finally stepped outside, the flash of cameras was blinding. She adjusted her pearl necklace and tried to speak into the sea of microphones. "This is a misunderstanding," she said, her voice tight. "The Brookwood community remains strong. We are confident this will be resolved in our favor." But before she could continue, a reporter cut in. "Mrs. Ellison, how do you explain the judge's ruling that Evelyn Carter is the rightful owner of the land your homes are built on?" Margaret froze. The cameras captured every flicker of panic on her face. She stammered something about appeals, then pushed past the crowd, her bodyguards forming a wall around her. That night, the footage went viral. Side-by-side clips spread across social media, Margaret stumbling for words while Evelyn, in a quiet interview on her porch, spoke with calm dignity. "My family never sold this land," Evelyn told the camera. "They thought they could erase us, but the land remembers." The contrast was devastating. Public opinion shifted sharply in Evelyn's favor. Inside Brookwood, the pressure cooker finally burst. At an emergency town hall meeting, residents flooded the clubhouse, their voices rising in anger. A young father named David slammed his fist on the table. "I put everything I have into my home. You told us this neighborhood was secure, that our investments were safe. Now my wife can't sleep at night wondering if we'll be thrown out." A woman shouted from the back, "Margaret lied to us. She gambled with our lives." The room erupted. Some homeowners demanded Margaret resign. Others threatened to sue the board themselves. The once pristine clubhouse, with its polished floors and perfect decor, now echoed with chaos. Margaret tried to gavel the room into silence, but no one listened. The HOA board, the untouchable rulers of Brookwood, were being eaten alive by their own subjects. Meanwhile, Evelyn made her move. She instructed Malik, her lawyer, to file for retroactive land rent compensation for every month the HOA had occupied her property without permission. The number was staggering, millions of dollars. Malik smirked as he slid the paperwork across the judge's bench. "If they want to stay, they'll have to pay. If not, we proceed with eviction." The HOA board sat pale and silent. The room seemed to tilt under the weight of the demand. Margaret whispered hoarsely, "You're bleeding us dry." Evelyn didn't even look at her. She kept her gaze steady on the judge. "No. I'm making you pay what you owe." The humiliation only deepened when Evelyn received an invitation to speak at the County Historical Society. Standing at a podium in front of a packed audience, she told the story of her grandfather, who bought the land after emancipation and swore it would remain in the Carter family for generations. "My grandfather knew this land would be our anchor," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "He built it so that no matter what storms came, we'd have a place to stand. And now, after all their bulldozers and boardrooms, we still stand." The crowd rose to their feet in applause. The speech was broadcast live on local TV, clips circulating online with captions like, "The woman who outsmarted the HOA," and "Carter vs. Goliath." Brookwood's reputation plummeted. Home values tanked. Realtors quietly stopped showing the houses. The once gleaming, master-planned community was now a cautionary tale. Margaret sat alone one night in her spotless kitchen, staring at a glass of untouched wine. The pearl necklace lay on the counter beside her, a dull reminder of the image she once projected. Her phone buzzed constantly, texts from furious homeowners, calls from lawyers, reporters demanding comment. But she couldn't bring herself to answer. For the first time, she realized Evelyn hadn't just trapped her legally. She had trapped her socially, publicly, morally. Margaret wasn't just losing a case. She was losing her power, her reputation, her very identity. And Evelyn? She hadn't even raised her voice once. On a warm Saturday afternoon, Evelyn walked her land with Malik by her side. They strolled past the oak trees, past the creek where she used to play as a child, past the neat rows of houses that had sprung up without her permission. "They thought they were building a kingdom," Malik said, shaking his head. "Turns out they built it on sand." Evelyn smiled faintly. "No. They built it on roots. Roots they didn't understand." They paused at the edge of the cul-de-sac, where children rode their bikes in nervous silence, parents watching from porches with anxious eyes. Evelyn's heart softened a little. These families hadn't asked for this fight. But the HOA had dragged them into it. Malik noticed her hesitation. "We could negotiate, you know. Let them stay if they pay." Evelyn's gaze lingered on the children. "Maybe. But first, they need to understand that this isn't theirs. It never was." She straightened her back, the sun dipping low behind her. "And I'm going to make sure they never forget it." By the end of the week, Evelyn delivered her ultimatum: pay rent for every house or face eviction. The HOA board scrambled, begging for more time, pleading for mercy. But Evelyn was done waiting. The trap was ready to close. The courthouse was silent as the judge entered, his gavel echoing like a gunshot through the chamber. The room was full, reporters crammed into the back rows, homeowners clutching each other's hands, the HOA board sitting stiffly in their pressed suits. At the front, Evelyn Carter sat in her plain blue dress, her hands folded neatly in her lap. On the table beside her lay the documents that had caused the entire storm, the Carter deeds, worn but unbroken, passed down through 3 generations. Judge Morales adjusted his glasses and looked over the case file. His voice was calm, but every word carried the weight of finality. After thorough review of the evidence, this court finds that the land in question does, and has always, legally belonged to the Carter family. Therefore, the Brookwood Homeowners Association, its board, and its residents have been unlawfully occupying said property. Gasps rippled through the room. A few homeowners sobbed openly. The HOA board sat frozen, their faces pale. The judge continued. As for remedy, the court grants ownership of all 96 homes, their structures, and land improvements to Mrs. Evelyn Carter as compensation. The HOA is hereby dissolved. Any homeowners wishing to remain may negotiate rental terms directly with Mrs. Carter. Otherwise, eviction proceedings will begin in 60 days. The gavel struck once more. Case closed. The room exploded into chaos. Reporters rushed forward, homeowners shouted in disbelief, and Margaret Ellison's pearl necklace snapped as she staggered to her feet. "You can't do this," she screamed, her voice cracking. "These are our homes. Our lives." Evelyn rose slowly, turning to face Margaret. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the room with unshakable clarity. "You did this to yourselves." Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed as Evelyn emerged, flanked by Malik. Reporters shouted questions. "What will you do with the homes? Will you evict the families? Do you feel vindicated?" Evelyn paused on the steps, the crowd falling into an expectant hush. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply lifted her chin and spoke. "My grandfather bought this land when black families weren't supposed to own anything. He fought for it. My parents worked this soil with their hands. And I swore I'd never let it be taken. Today, that promise was kept." The crowd erupted, cameras flashing like lightning. Back in Brookwood, the fallout was immediate. Realtors pulled their listings. Home values crashed. Families packed boxes in a panic, unsure if they'd be forced out. Others lined up at Evelyn's farmhouse, papers in hand, begging for rental agreements. Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, her cedar box open beside her, as Malik guided families through contracts. She was stern but fair, charging rent that was manageable, enough to remind them the land wasn't theirs, but not enough to ruin them. Some families, humbled, thanked her with tears in their eyes. Others spat bitter words as they signed, forced to bow to the woman they had once dismissed as a relic. But the children still rode their bikes, still laughed in the cul-de-sacs, still played under the oak trees. And Evelyn, watching from her porch, found peace in that. As for Margaret Ellison, her empire was gone. The HOA that once bowed to her gavel had dissolved into history. Reporters hounded her until she vanished from public view, her name forever tied to the scandal. One evening, weeks later, Evelyn found Margaret standing at the edge of her property line, dressed plainly, her pearls gone. "You destroyed me," Margaret whispered. Evelyn shook her head. "No. You destroyed yourself when you thought power made you untouchable." Margaret's eyes brimmed with tears, but Evelyn turned away, walking back to her porch without another word. The seasons turned. The subdivision that once boasted of perfection now bore the quiet dignity of truth. Some families stayed, grateful for second chances. Others left, their houses empty shells waiting for new tenants. But the land, the Carter land, remained whole. On a crisp autumn morning, Evelyn walked the property lines with her granddaughter, Maya. The girl's hand was small in hers, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Grandma," Maya asked, "why did you fight them?" Evelyn stopped beneath the old oak tree, its roots gnarled and deep, stretching farther than the eye could see. She rested her hand against the bark. Because, baby, she said softly, land remembers who it belongs to. And family remembers who they are. Maya looked up at her, eyes shining. Will it always be ours? Evelyn smiled, her heart swelling with pride. As long as we protect it. As long as we never forget. The wind whispered through the leaves, carrying the voices of generations past. And Evelyn Carter, with her head held high, knew the trap had not just caught the HOA. It had preserved her legacy. Forever.